Maya Johnson adjusted her designer blazer as she settled into seat 2A, the plush leather of the first-class cabin embracing her tired body. At 24, she had worked tirelessly to build her marketing consultancy from the ground up. And this trip to Atlanta was the culmination of months of negotiations with a major client. The flight from New York would give her time to review her presentation one final time. She pulled out her laptop and began scrolling through her slides, occasionally sipping the champagne the flight attendant had offered. The cabin was nearly empty, with only 3 other passengers scattered throughout the premium section. Maya felt grateful for the quiet space to prepare for tomorrow's make-or-break meeting. As boarding continued, she noticed a middle-aged white woman in an expensive fur coat approaching her row. The woman stopped directly beside Maya's seat and cleared her throat loudly. Maya looked up from her laptop, expecting perhaps a friendly greeting or question about the overhead bins. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice dripping with entitlement. "I think you're in my seat." Maya blinked, confused. She double-checked her boarding pass against the seat number above her head. "I'm sorry, but this is definitely my seat. 2A, see?" She held up her boarding pass with a polite smile. The woman barely glanced at the pass. "That can't be right. There must be some mistake. I always sit in first class, and I specifically requested this seat." Her tone grew more agitated with each word. A flight attendant named Jennifer approached, having overheard the commotion. She was a woman in her 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Is there a problem here, ladies?" The woman in the fur coat immediately launched into her complaint. "This girl is sitting in my seat. I fly first class every month, and I know this is where I'm supposed to be. She obviously doesn't belong here." Maya felt her cheeks burn. The implication was clear, though unspoken. She took a deep breath and handed her boarding pass to Jennifer. "Here's my boarding pass. As you can see, I'm assigned to seat 2A. Jennifer barely looked at the pass before handing it back. "Ma'am, I'm sure there's been some confusion. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in coach. We can find you a nice seat there." Maya's mouth fell open. "More comfortable in coach? I paid for this seat. I have a first-class ticket, as you can clearly see?" The woman in the fur coat crossed her arms triumphantly. "See? I told you she doesn't belong here. Some people just don't understand airplane etiquette." Other passengers were beginning to stare, and Maya felt the familiar sting of humiliation she'd experienced too many times before. But this time was different. She wasn't a teenager being followed around a department store, or a college student being questioned about her presence in an upscale restaurant. She was a successful businesswoman who had every right to be exactly where she was. Jennifer's voice took on a patronizing tone. "Look, we're trying to resolve this peacefully. Why don't you just move to an available seat in economy? The flight is full, but I'm sure we can squeeze you in somewhere." Maya stood up slowly, her 5'6" frame radiating quiet dignity. "I'm not moving anywhere. This is my assigned seat, which I purchased with my own money. If there's been a mistake, I suggest you check your computer system." The woman in the fur coat huffed loudly. "This is ridiculous. Do you know who I am? I've been flying with this airline for 15 years. I shouldn't have to deal with this kind of situation." Jennifer nodded sympathetically at the woman, then turned back to Maya with barely concealed irritation. "Ma'am, you're holding up the boarding process. If you don't cooperate, we'll have to call security." Maya's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. "Call whoever you need to call. I'm not moving from my legally purchased seat." The tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Other first-class passengers whispered among themselves, some pulling out their phones to record the confrontation. Maya realized this moment would define not just her flight, but potentially much more. As if on cue, a male flight attendant named Robert approached. He was tall and imposing, with the kind of authority that suggested he was used to getting his way. "What seems to be the problem here?" Jennifer quickly explained the situation, painting Maya as an uncooperative passenger who was refusing to give up a seat that didn't belong to her. Robert nodded along, his expression growing stern as he looked at Maya. "Miss, I'm going to need you to gather your belongings and move to coach. We have paying first-class customers who need their seats." Maya felt something snap inside her. The injustice of it all, the casual racism, the assumption that she couldn't possibly afford to be where she was, it all boiled over. But instead of exploding, she became perfectly calm. "I am a paying first-class customer," she said quietly, "and I'm going to need to make a phone call before I go anywhere." Robert's expression hardened as Maya reached for her phone. "Ma'am, you can make all the phone calls you want once you're in your proper seat and coach. Right now, you're disrupting our boarding process." Maya ignored him and scrolled through her contacts. Her finger hovered over one name in particular, a name that could change everything about this situation in a matter of minutes. But she hesitated. She had spent years building her independence, proving she could succeed on her own merit without relying on family connections. The woman in the fur coat was growing more agitated by the minute. "This is absolutely unacceptable. I have a connecting flight to catch and I refuse to miss it because of this nonsense." She gestured dismissively at Maya. Jennifer stepped closer to Maya, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a reasonable tone. "Listen, honey, I'm trying to help you here. If you just cooperate and move quietly, we can pretend this whole misunderstanding never happened. But if you keep making a scene, things are going to get very uncomfortable for you." Maya looked around the cabin. More passengers were openly staring now, their phones recording every moment. She could see the mixture of emotions on their faces. Some looked uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. Others seemed to be enjoying the drama. A few appeared genuinely angry on her behalf. An older black gentleman in seat 4B caught her eye and gave her an almost imperceptible nod of support. A young white woman across the aisle was shaking her head in disgust at the crew's behavior. These small gestures of solidarity gave Maya strength. "I want to speak to the captain," Maya said firmly. Robert laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "The captain doesn't get involved in seating disputes. That's what we're here for. And we've made our decision." "Your decision is based on what exactly?" Maya asked. "Because it certainly isn't based on the boarding pass I've shown you multiple times, or the credit card receipt I can provide, or the confirmation email on my phone." Jennifer's mask of professionalism was beginning to slip. "Your decision is to stop being difficult and do what you're told." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Maya realized that this wasn't really about a seat at all. This was about power, about who belonged where, about assumptions that had nothing to do with boarding passes or ticket prices. She looked at her phone again. The name in her contacts seemed to glow on the screen. Dad, office. David Johnson, CEO of Johnson Industries, one of the largest logistics companies in the country, a man who happened to sit on the board of directors of this very airline. Maya had always been proud of keeping her father's influence separate from her own achievements. She used her mother's maiden name professionally, flew under her own credentials, and had built her business without a single phone call to Daddy. But this wasn't about business anymore. This was about basic human dignity. Robert was checking his watch impatiently. "Ma'am, I'm going to count to 10, and then we're calling airport. Security to have you removed from this aircraft." "1, he began. Maya's thumb hovered over her father's number. 2. The woman in the fur coat was practically vibrating with satisfaction. 3. Maya thought about all the times she'd backed down, all the microaggressions she'd swallowed, all the moments when she'd chosen peace over principles. 4. She thought about the young black girls who might be watching the videos that were undoubtedly being uploaded to social media right now. 5. She thought about her parents who had worked tirelessly to build a business empire despite facing discrimination at every turn. 6. She thought about her grandmother who had lived through segregation and would have been appalled to see her granddaughter treated this way. 7. Maya pressed the call button. 8. The phone rang once. 9. It rang twice. "Dad?" Maya's voice was steady as steel. "It's me. I'm on flight 447 to Atlanta, and I need you to make a call to someone at the airline, right now." Robert stopped counting, his confidence faltering slightly as he heard the authority in Maya's voice. David Johnson's voice came through the phone clearly, and Maya didn't bother to lower her volume. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "I'm being asked To give up my first-class seat to a white passenger, because the crew doesn't believe I belong here. The flight attendants are threatening to call security on me. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then her father's voice, cold as winter, put one of them on the phone now. The color drained from Robert's face as Maya extended her phone toward him. My father would like to speak with you. Robert hesitated, clearly sensing that the dynamic had shifted dramatically. I don't need to speak to anyone. This is an airline matter and take the phone. Maya's voice cut through his protest like a blade. Unless you'd prefer to explain to your supervisor why you refuse to speak to a member of the airline's board of directors. Jennifer's eyes widened. Board of directors? Maya kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that the tables were turning. Sadness that it had taken her father's name to get basic respect. Robert reluctantly took the phone, his hand trembling slightly. Hello, this is Robert Martinez, senior flight attendant. Maya couldn't hear her father's words, but she could see Robert's face change with each passing second. His cocky demeanor crumbled, replaced by a look of growing horror. His responses were stammered and apologetic. Yes, sir. I understand, sir. No, sir, that's not acceptable. Yes, sir, I realize the seriousness. The woman in the fur coat was watching the exchange with growing alarm. What's going on here? Who is she calling? Jennifer tried to maintain her composure, but Maya could see the panic creeping into her eyes. Ma'am, if you could just show me your boarding pass again, I'd like to verify. You've seen my boarding pass 3 times already, Maya said calmly. Each time you ignored the evidence right in front of you. Robert was nodding frantically. Into the phone. Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. Right away, sir. He handed the phone back to Maya with shaking hands. Your father would like to speak with you again. Maya took the phone back. Dad? Sweetheart, I'm so sorry this happened to you. I've spoken to the crew member and I'm about to make several more calls. Are you safe right now? I'm fine, Dad, just tired of dealing with this kind of ignorance. I know, baby, I know. Your mother and I thought we'd built a world where you wouldn't have to face what we faced. I'm proud of how you're handling this. Maya felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. What happens now? Now? Now there are going to be some very serious consequences for the people who thought they could treat my daughter like a second-class citizen. After hanging up, Maya noticed that the entire first-class cabin had gone silent. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Robert was whispering urgently with Jennifer, both of them stealing nervous glances at Maya. The woman in the fur coat had overheard enough of the conversation to realize she had made a terrible mistake. Look, I didn't mean anything by it. I just thought there was a mix-up with the seating. These things happen all the time. Maya turned to face her fully for the first time. These things happen to people who look like me, you mean? The woman opened and closed her mouth like a fish out of water. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant, Maya said quietly. You saw a young black woman in first class and assumed she didn't belong here. You didn't check my boarding pass, you didn't ask polite questions. You demanded I move based on nothing but your own prejudices. Jennifer tried to salvage the situation. Perhaps we can upgrade you to business class as an apology for any confusion. There was no confusion, Maya interrupted. There was racism. And there's a very big difference. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a slight delay due to crew scheduling issues. We apologize for any inconvenience, and we'll have you on your way shortly. Robert's radio buzzed, and he answered with obvious reluctance. Maya couldn't hear the conversation, but she watched his face go from pale to ashen. When he finished the call, he approached Maya with the demeanor of a man walking to his execution. Ms. Johnson, I've been instructed to inform you that the airline sincerely apologizes for this incident. We're investigating the matter immediately, and there will be appropriate consequences for all staff involved. The woman in the fur coat was now frantically searching through her purse. Here's my boarding pass. Look, it says 12F. Economy class. I made a mistake. Maya looked at the boarding pass. Economy class, just as the woman now claimed. So you knew all along that this wasn't your seat, I, I thought, I usually upgrade myself, and I assumed, you assumed that I would just give up my seat because you asked me to, because you felt entitled to it. The woman had no answer for that. The truth was laid bare for everyone to see. This hadn't been about a seating mix-up at all. It had been about entitlement, privilege, and the assumption that Maya would simply comply with an unreasonable demand. Jennifer's radio crackled to life, and Maya heard her supervisor's voice clearly through the static. Jennifer, you and Robert need to gather your belongings and disembark immediately. You're both suspended pending a full investigation. The look of shock on Jennifer's face was almost comical. But sir, I was just trying to handle a difficult passenger situation. The difficult passengers were you and your colleague, came the reply. Security is on their way to escort you off the aircraft. 2 airport security officers entered the first-class cabin within minutes, their expressions professional but firm. Behind them walked a woman in a crisp airline uniform with multiple service pins and a name tag that read, Sarah Mitchell, Customer Service Supervisor. Ms. Johnson? Sarah approached with genuine concern in her voice. I'm Sarah Mitchell, and I want to personally apologize for what you've experienced today. This behavior is completely unacceptable and does not represent the values of our airline. Jennifer and Robert were gathering their belongings with the frantic movements of people whose world had just collapsed around them. Jennifer made one last attempt at damage control. This is all a misunderstanding. We were just trying to resolve a seating issue. The passenger was being uncooperative, and we followed standard protocol. Standard protocol? Sarah's voice cut through Jennifer's excuses. Standard protocol is to check documentation before asking any passenger to move. Standard protocol is to treat every customer with respect regardless of their appearance. What you did was discriminate against a paying customer based on racial assumptions. Robert tried to defend their actions. We've handled situations like this before. Sometimes people get confused about their seats, especially passengers who might not be familiar with. Stop talking, Sarah said sharply. Every word out of your mouth is making this worse. Security will escort you both off this aircraft immediately. The woman in the fur coat was trying to make herself invisible in her seat, but Maya wasn't about to let her off the hook. Excuse me, ma'am. I believe you owe everyone on this flight an explanation. All eyes turned to the woman whose face was now bright red with embarrassment. I made an error in judgment. What kind of error? Maya pressed. I thought. The woman struggled to find words that wouldn't make her sound as prejudiced as she clearly was. An older gentleman from across the aisle spoke up. What you thought was that this young lady couldn't possibly afford to sit in first class. What you thought was that her presence here was some kind of mistake that needed to be corrected. The woman's silence was answer enough. Sarah turned to Maya with sincere remorse. Ms. Johnson, I want you to know that both flight attendants involved in this incident are being immediately suspended without pay. They will face a full investigation, and I can assure you that their employment with this airline is in serious jeopardy. Maya nodded, but she wasn't finished. What about her? She gestured toward the woman in the fur coat. She's the one who started this entire situation with her false claim about the seat. Sarah looked at the woman with barely concealed disgust. Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your boarding pass and identification. With trembling hands, the woman produced her documents. Sarah examined them carefully, then looked at her with the kind of stern expression usually reserved for misbehaving children. Mrs. Patricia Whitman, according to your boarding pass, you're assigned to seat 12F in economy class. You deliberately lied about your seat assignment and attempted to have another passenger removed from their rightful seat based on false claims. Patricia Whitman squirmed under the scrutiny. I travel frequently, and I'm used to being upgraded. I thought there might have been a computer error. You thought no such thing, Sarah interrupted. You saw a young black woman in first class and decided she didn't belong there. You made a conscious choice to try to have her removed, despite having no legitimate claim to her seat. The entire cabin was watching this exchange with rapt attention. Several passengers were still recording on their phones, and Maya realized this incident would likely go viral within hours. A new flight attendant, a young black man named Marcus, approached with a tablet in his hand. "Ms. Mitchell, I've pulled up the passenger manifests and seat assignments. Everything is exactly as Ms. Johnson stated. Seat 2A was purchased by Maya Johnson 3 weeks ago, paid for with her own credit card." Sarah nodded grimly. "Mrs. Whitman, you have two choices. You can apologize sincerely to Ms. Johnson and take your assigned seat in economy, or you can be removed from this flight entirely. But let me be clear. Your frequent flyer status will not protect you from the consequences of your actions today." Patricia Whitman looked around the cabin, seeing nothing but disapproving faces. Even the passengers who had initially watched the drama unfold as entertainment now looked at her with disgust. I apologize," she said quietly, not meeting Maya's eyes. "I can't hear you," Maya said, "and neither can anyone else on this plane. If you're going to apologize, do it properly." The woman's face burned with humiliation, but she had no choice. "I apologize to you, Ms. Johnson. I was wrong to assume you didn't belong in first class. I was wrong to try to have you removed from your seat. I acted based on prejudice, and I'm sorry." Maya studied her for a long moment. "Are you sorry you did it, or are you sorry you got caught?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Patricia Whitman struggled to find an answer that wouldn't further incriminate her. "I'm sorry I did it," she finally said. "It was wrong, and I know better." Sarah was taking notes on her tablet throughout the exchange. "Mrs. Whitman, you'll be moved to your assigned seat now. However, I want you to know that this incident will be reported to our customer service department, and your behavior today will be noted in your frequent flyer profile." As security escorted Jennifer and Robert off the plane, Maya felt a complex mix of emotions. Justice was being served, but the whole situation left her feeling exhausted. She thought about all the times similar incidents probably occurred without witnesses, without phone cameras, without daughters of board members to call for help. Marcus approached her seat with a warm smile. "Ms. Johnson, is there anything I can get you? We'd like to make the rest of your flight as comfortable as possible." Maya looked at this young man who would now be serving the cabin that Jennifer and Robert had just been removed from. She wondered if he had ever faced similar situations, if he understood the weight of what had just happened. "Just some water, please," she said. "And Marcus, thank you for standing up and providing the facts when it mattered." He nodded with understanding. "We have to look out for each other, ma'am. What happened to you today wasn't just wrong, it was illegal discrimination." As the plane finally taxied toward takeoff, Maya found herself in an unexpectedly quiet first-class cabin. Patricia Whitman had been moved to economy as promised, and the remaining passengers seemed to be processing what they had witnessed. Several had approached Maya during the boarding delay to offer their support and express their disgust at how she had been treated. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Called the CEO directly. There will be a full investigation and significant policy changes. I'm proud of how you handled yourself. Love you." She smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with vindication and everything to do with family support. But her satisfaction was tempered by the knowledge that not everyone in her situation would have had the resources to fight back effectively. Marcus returned with her water and quietly said, "Ms. Johnson, I want you to know that what happened today is going to make a difference. I've been working for this airline for 2 years and I've seen things, incidents that were handled very differently." Maya looked at him with interest. "What do you mean?" He glanced around to make sure no supervisors were within earshot, then leaned in slightly. "I mean, I've seen passengers like you get moved to economy without question. I've seen people accept it because they didn't want to make a scene. What you did today, standing your ground, demanding respect, it's going to change how situations like this are handled in the future." A middle-aged white businessman in seat 3C turned around. "Excuse me, miss, I couldn't help but overhear. I travel constantly for work, and I have to say I've witnessed similar incidents before. I'm ashamed to admit I usually just looked the other way, told myself it wasn't my business. Maya studied his face, seeing genuine regret there. What's different now? Seeing it play out in front of me, seeing the courage it took for you to stand up for yourself. I realize I've been part of the problem by staying silent. I recorded part of what happened, and with your permission, I'd like to share it. People need to see this. Maya considered his request carefully. Going viral wasn't something she had wanted, but she realized the potential impact. What's your name? James Patterson. I'm a marketing executive, and I have a pretty substantial social media following. This story needs to be told. Before Maya could respond, her phone began buzzing with notifications. She looked at the screen to see mentions, tags, and messages flooding in. Apparently, other passengers had already begun sharing their recordings of the incident. One video, posted by the young woman who had been sitting across the aisle, was already gaining traction. The caption read, "This is what racism looks like in 2025. Young black businesswoman humiliated by airline crew who assumed she didn't belong in first class. Watch how she handles it with grace and dignity. This is why we still need to fight." Another post, from the elderly gentleman who had nodded his support earlier, was equally powerful. Witnessed blatant discrimination today. Reminded me of stories my grandfather told about the old days. Thought we were past this, we're not. Do better, America. Maya scrolled through the comments, seeing a mix of support, outrage, and unfortunately, some predictably racist responses. But the overwhelming majority of comments were supportive, with many people sharing their own similar experiences. Sarah Mitchell approached Maya's seat once more, this time with a tablet and a very official-looking document. "Ms. Johnson, I have some updates for you." Maya looked up expectantly. First, both Jennifer Martinez and Robert Wilson have been terminated, effective immediately. This wasn't just a suspension. Their employment with the airline has been permanently ended. Maya nodded, feeling a sense of justice but no joy in anyone losing their job. Second, Mrs. Whitman has been placed on a restricted passenger list. She'll be allowed to complete today's flight, but her frequent flyer privileges have been suspended, and any future incidents will result in a permanent ban from our airline. Sarah paused, checking her tablet. Third, and most importantly, this incident has prompted an immediate review of all crew training protocols. Your father spoke directly with our CEO, and they've agreed to implement new mandatory training on unconscious bias, discrimination, and proper customer service protocols. Maya was impressed by the swift action, but she had one more question. What about accountability? How do we know this training will actually make a difference? Sarah smiled. Your father suggested that you might be interested in consulting on the new training program. He mentioned that you run a marketing and consulting firm? Maya blinked in surprise. Her father had managed to turn this horrible experience into a potential business opportunity while ensuring meaningful change. It was exactly the kind of strategic thinking that had made him successful. I'd be very interested in that conversation, Maya said. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Maya reflected on the events of the day. What had started as a routine business trip had become something much larger, a catalyst for change, a viral moment that could spark important conversations about discrimination and privilege. Her laptop chimed with an email notification. The subject line made her smile. Partnership opportunity. Anti-discrimination training program. The email was from the airline's head of human resources, asking to schedule a meeting to discuss Maya's potential involvement in overhauling their customer service and bias training programs. The compensation package mentioned was substantial, and the scope of work would impact thousands of employees across the company. Maya looked around the now peaceful cabin. Marcus was efficiently serving other passengers, treating everyone with equal respect and professionalism. The businessman, James Patterson, was working on what appeared to be a thoughtful social media post about bystander responsibility. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Saw the videos online. Proud of you for standing up for yourself, and for everyone who will come after you. Dad told me about the consulting opportunity. This is how change happens. One brave stand at a time. Maya smiled, finally feeling the tension leave her shoulders. What had begun as discrimination and humiliation was transforming into an opportunity to create systemic change. She opened her laptop and began drafting ideas for the training program, her mind already racing with strategies to ensure that no other passenger would face what she had experienced today. 6 months later, Maya stood in the boardroom of the airline's headquarters, presenting her final report on the company-wide transformation initiative she had led. The room was filled with executives, including the CEO, her father, and several other board members who had become invested in the success of the program. "The results speak for themselves," Maya said, clicking to the next slide. "Customer discrimination complaints have dropped by 87%. Employee satisfaction scores have increased significantly, particularly among staff of color. And most importantly, we've created a culture where intervention is not just encouraged, but expected." The CEO, Patricia Hayes, nodded approvingly. "Maya, your program has exceeded every expectation we had. The Speak Up, Stand Up protocol you developed has become a model that other airlines are now requesting to license from us." Maya smiled, thinking back to that terrible day on Flight 447. What had begun as a humiliating experience had evolved into a career-defining project that was creating ripple effects throughout the entire industry. "The key," Maya continued, "was recognizing that discrimination isn't just a training problem, it's a cultural problem. We didn't just teach employees what not to do, we empowered them to actively create inclusive environments." Her father, David Johnson, beamed with pride. From his seat at the conference table, "I think it's important to note that Maya's approach has not only improved our ethical standards, but also our bottom line. Customer satisfaction ratings are at an all-time high, and we've seen a notable increase in bookings from diverse communities." Maya clicked to a video testimonial from Marcus, the flight attendant who had supported her that day. "The new protocols make me feel confident about stepping in when I see problems. We're not just serving passengers anymore, we're protecting them, and that makes me proud to wear this uniform." The room watched several more testimonials from employees and passengers, each one highlighting specific improvements in service and culture. Patricia Hayes stood up. "Maya, I have an announcement to make. The board has approved a permanent position for you as our Director of Inclusion and Customer Experience. We'd like you to expand this program to all aspects of our operations, from hiring to executive training." Maya felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with purpose. "I'm honored by the offer, and I accept." As the meeting concluded and executives filed out, Maya's father approached her. "You know, sweetheart, when you called me that day, I was furious. I wanted to use every bit of influence I had to destroy the careers of everyone who had treated you badly." Maya looked at him curiously. "What changed your mind?" "You did. When I saw how you handled yourself, how you turned anger into action and injustice into opportunity, I realized you didn't need me to fight your battles. You needed me to amplify your voice." They walked together toward the window overlooking the airport's main terminal. Planes were taking off and landing in a steady rhythm, carrying passengers who would hopefully never experience what Maya had endured on Flight 447. "Have you heard anything about Jennifer and Robert?" Maya asked. Her father nodded grimly. "Jennifer took a job with a small regional airline, but she was let go within 3 months after another discrimination incident. Robert left the airline industry entirely. Word travels fast in this business, when you're known for treating customers badly." "And Patricia Whitman?" "She's been banned from 3 major airlines now. Turns out your incident wasn't her first time making racist demands. Other passengers have come forward with similar stories." Maya shook her head, feeling a mixture of sadness and vindication. "I hope she's learned something from all of this." "I doubt it," her father said honestly. "But what matters is that thousands of other people have learned from it. The videos from that day have been viewed millions of times. Your story has inspired other passengers to speak up, other employees to intervene, and other companies to examine their own practices." Maya's phone buzzed with a notification. She looked down to see a message from a young black woman named Destiny. "Ms. Johnson, I was on a flight yesterday and a situation started that was similar to yours. But this time, the crew immediately shut it down and supported me. The other passengers spoke up too. Thank you for making it possible for people like me to travel with dignity." Similar messages had been arriving regularly for months. Maya had received thank you notes from passengers, job applications from people inspired by her stand, and consulting requests from companies wanting to implement similar programs. You know what the best part of all this is? Maya asked her father, as they watched planes taxi on the runway below. What's that? I never have to wonder what if again. What if I had just moved to economy? What if I had stayed quiet? What if I had let them treat me like I didn't matter? I know I did the right thing even when it was hard. David Johnson put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. Your grandmother would be so proud. She spent her whole life fighting for the right to be treated with dignity in public spaces. You're carrying on that legacy in your own powerful way. Maya thought about her grandmother's stories of segregated buses and whites-only restaurants, of small daily humiliations that were accepted as normal. The difference is Grandma had to fight just for the right to sit anywhere on the bus. I was fighting for the right to sit where I'd already paid to be. That's progress, her father said. Slow, imperfect progress, but progress nonetheless. As they prepared to leave the building, Maya's phone rang. It was Marcus calling from somewhere loud and busy, probably an airport. Maya, I had to call you. I'm working a flight right now and something amazing just happened. Maya put the phone on speaker so her father could hear. What's going on? A passenger tried to pull the same thing that woman tried with you. Told a young Latino man that he was in the wrong seat. Demanded he move to economy. But here's the thing. Before I could even get there, 3 other passengers had already stepped in. They told her to sit down and mind her own business. One of them pulled out his phone and said he'd be happy to record her discriminatory behavior for social media. Maya smiled widely. What did she do? Sat down in her own seat and didn't say another word for the entire flight. Maya, the culture, has changed. Passengers aren't just watching anymore. They're actively shutting down discrimination when they see it. After hanging up, Maya felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The ripple effects of her decision to stand her ground were continuing, to spread in ways she never could have imagined. Her father checked his watch. I have another meeting, but before I go, there's something else. The NAACP wants to present you with their Courage in Action Award next month. They said your incident and the changes it sparked represent exactly the kind of modern civil rights activism they want to celebrate. Maya felt overwhelmed by the honor. Dad, all I did was refuse to give up my seat. Sweetheart, he said with a knowing smile, sometimes refusing to give up your seat changes the world. As Maya walked through the terminal toward her own flight home, she noticed something that might have escaped her attention before. A young black businessman was settling into his first-class seat without a second glance from anyone. A Latina woman was confidently claiming her premium boarding privileges. An elderly Asian couple was being treated with the same respect as every other passenger. These small moments of normalcy, of people being treated fairly regardless of their race, were perhaps the greatest victory of all. Maya boarded her flight with a sense of purpose and satisfaction, knowing that her moment of courage had created lasting change that would benefit countless travelers for years to come. The flight attendant, a young woman who looked to be about Maya's age, greeted her warmly. Ms. Johnson, I just wanted to say thank you. I went through the new training program you designed and it's made me so much more confident about handling difficult situations. You've made a real difference. As the plane lifted off, Maya reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought her to this moment. What began as the worst day of her professional travel had transformed into the most meaningful work of her career. Sometimes standing up for what's right doesn't just change your own life. It changes the world around you, one interaction at a time.